Jurassic Theropods. Welcome, guys, once again to the channel, Ranking with Dinosaurs, where we rank. You guessed it, dinosaurs, and yes, we're back to dinosaurs, finally. We're stopping with the meandering around, just a bunch of different things that are not dinosaurs. Today we're back, and we're going to be talking about one of my favorite groups of animals. Not necessarily phylogenetically speaking, but in the sense of the time period. I think, and I believe that the Jurassic is highly underrated in terms of theropods, because, when you think of theropods, we think of the Cretaceous, the big mega theropods like, Tyrannosaurs, we got Carcharodontosaurus, Spinosaurus, all sorts of things. But the Jurassic does have its fair share of weird little weirdos and big boys as well. So, without further ado, oh yeah, before I forget, there's a certain group missing in this video. It's gonna be Megalosaurus, which are were very common in the Jurassic. That's why I did do a separate video first. So there's gonna be, if you get to this channel, there's gonna be a Megalosaur tier list. So if you wanna check Megalosaurus, check that one out. So for this video, I'm gonna be starting with Allosaurus. So we're gonna be starting a little strong here because Allosaurus, it is probably the most famous theropod from late Jurassic. Late Jurassic, don't get ahead of yourself. From late Jurassic of in North America and Europe, remember. There is also a European species. And it is sometimes known as the Lion of the Jurassic, rightly so. These guys are unhinged, as we're going to be talking about later. Funny thing, this Allosaurus was known as Antrodemus for like over half a century, so now you know. A little tidbit of information. There are 3 species of Allosaurus, and it is honestly, I believe it is like the most abundant large predator of, I don't know if the Jurassic, but definitely from the Morrison Formation. Morrison Formation, where it was, serving as the top dog, top predator, top of the food chain, basically. This Allosaurus was running things back in the day. I'm gonna show you here. This is not an Allosaurus, but is a Saurophagonax figure. But honestly, it is modeled after an Allosaurus fossil, so might as well be Allosaurus, a very large Allosaurus. You can see it had a pretty large head. It was robust but lightly built as well, and they could open their mouths pretty wide too. I really like that about this figure. Where, if you remember my the weird theories about dinosaurs, and you saw the axe theory, the axe bite, that was for Allosaurus. It was pretty insane, pretty dumb as well. But it had a pretty long neck, very flexible, and pretty large serrated teeth. So again, this guy was hunting stegosaurs, sauropods probably. And it was obviously bullying other predators too. I wouldn't be surprised, as we see in a lot of different documentaries. But yeah, this guy was a menace. Again, a lot of Allosaurus fossils and a lot of specimens show pathologies due to injuries, not only by herbivores, trying to defend themselves against this thing, but also all other Allosaurus, were just biting and kicking each other in the face. So Allosaurus, I hate to do it like right at the beginning of the video, but it's gonna be S tier. ELAPHROSAURUS. Now ELAPHROSAURUS is a ceratosaurian theropod from late Jurassic in Tanzania, Africa. So this is a medium-sized, very lightly built and slender theropod. This guy reached 20 feet in length. As its max size as an adult. And I gotta say, morphologically, this guy is very important and very interesting. So, one of the main things is that being such a, there are small theropods, like small dromaeosaurs. So, for ELAPHROSAURUS being this big, such a, being on the large size for theropods, especially in the Jurassic, their chests were very shallow. So as opposed to other big theropods, where even if they had, shorter, longer arms, um, had pretty robust and pretty, puffed up chests. Um, Again, secondly, I would say their hind limbs again, they were mostly very short, relative to its body size, which means that it wasn't very cursorial. So that makes me think that first, well, and this was something that paleontologists also thought. Uh, at first, they thought it was obviously a predator because it's back then if it's a theropod is a predator, but and they thought that they hunted small little ornithopods, swift ornithopods. However, as time went on and they did more analysis, specifically on the femur length and all of that, they came to the conclusion that not only is this guy a much more closer relative to Lemursaurus, which is a beaked theropod, this guy was probably in either a herbivore or an omnivorous dinosaur. So that's pretty awesome. Usually, theropods diversified insanely in the Cretaceous, but as you can see, even in the Jurassic, we still had some nice diversity between among theropods. So, ELAPHROSAURUS, there's nothing incredible about it if you just look at it like from plain sight. But honestly, I'm gonna put it in A tier. Such a different theropod. I like it. PIATNITZKYSAURUS. Now, this guy is an Titanuran theropod from the lower part of the Jurassic in what is now Argentina. Now, what you're thinking? Argentina is usually known for two things. In the Mesozoic, and that's the biggest sauropods that ever walked the earth, and big carcharodontosaurs. Now there are some other things, but those are like the two main things that Argentina is mainly known from, like Mesozoic Argentina. So the fact that we got some not only different theropods, not only theropod material, but from the lower Jurassic is honestly pretty interesting. I have to say the whole tub is honestly very complete. I didn't think, as a dinosaur as obscure as PIATNITZKYSAURUS. I say obscure because not a lot of people talk about it. So the fact that it has a very complete holotype, you got partial skull, and most of the postcranial remains are preserved in even a semi-articulated state. So pretty impressive. This is a medium-sized animal, which is honestly impressive for being such a basal Titanuran member, and that the whole type is complete, but it is only a subadult, so it wasn't max size. This subadult was, I believe, 14 feet long, something like that, and it did live with another contemporary sauropod, which was Patagosaurus. I was about to say Patagotitan, but that's not from there. Patagosaurus, which is I believe a cetiosaur. So PIATNITZKYSAURUS, honestly, it does give me Allosaurus vibes. Small Allosaurus vibes. It's not very impressive, I have to say. I think that's what mainly it is mainly fighting against. So I think I'm gonna put it right below ELAPHROSAURUS. I think B tier is good. MONOLOPHOSAURUS. Now, MONOLOPHOSAURUS, the single-crested lizard, is from the Middle Jurassic in the Shishogu Formation in China. Now, very obviously named because, it has that single crest on top of its skull. And it was a mid-sized predator, measuring between 16 and 18 feet, weighing 1,000 pounds, I believe. So, it's pretty hefty for a medium-sized dinosaur. Again, the most, outrageous feature of MONOLOPHOSAURUS is that crest around from, tip of the snout, parallel to the upper jaw, and stop right in between the eyes. So, pretty weird for a theropod. Not weird in that it had a crest, because, crested theropods are like, a thing. It's much weirder if a theropod does not have a crest, honestly. Some type of crest, if small or large. So the fact that this one had a single one, a single crest just going right across its nose and its face. I think it's pretty funny, honestly. Trying to imagine it that way, especially because we're so used to two parallel crests, or just crests on another place that's not running along your nose. But Monolophosaurus, again, this guy was for a long time considered to be a megalosaur, and their affinities were very unknown and very spotty. And history did not help Monolophosaurus a lot, and for a time also it was thought to be a synonym of the contemporary Guanlong, due to them having similar crests, just a single crest. But as we all know, Guanlong is found to be a very basal tyrannosauroid, that may be working on a tier list of basal tyrannosaurs, so be on the lookout for that. But Monolophosaurus, honestly, I'm not too attached to Monolophosaurus. I'm not gonna lie, it's not doing a lot for me. The crest is interesting, so I might put it above PIATNITZKYSAURUS, but only in B tier. Dilophosaurus. So Dilophosaurus is a theropod genus that lived in North America during the very early Jurassic. I don't know why me as a kid thought Dilophosaurus was a Triassic dinosaur. Obviously, I was much dumber back then, but just a little tidbit from me that I was pretty dumb, honestly. I was a kid. But this is a very famous animal, again, for its inaccurate, I have to say, appearance in Jurassic Park. It was discovered in 1940. Dilophosaurus, not Jurassic Park. I just want to leave that clear. It bore two crests. Now, these two crests that you see right there, when you see them, I know, it's pretty characteristic. You cannot mistake Dilophosaurus. It was 23 feet in length, and it weighed 900 pounds. This made it one of the earliest large predatory dinosaurs. Like, 23 feet was absolutely huge for early Jurassic. Like, animals were probably looking at this thing like, the Antichrist. It was a slender, as you can see here, this little Dilophosaurus figure. It's very slender and lightly built. It had a proportionately large skull. It was very delicate, but really strong. The snout actually had a little kink. I don't know if you can see it, honestly. It's a really small figure. But there was a little kink right under the nostril, which is, very characteristic of Dilophosaurus as well. And on top of the snout, again, that characteristic crest, which, again, it was covered in keratin, so it's probably much bigger than what we have in the fossil record. And something that we still don't know the exact shape of, because the actual fossil, it is incomplete, that part of the crest, but much recently we do have much accurate, you could say, reconstructions of the crest, and this figure right here actually shows it pretty well. I want to say, like, the crests were much, like, not fused together, but they're much more close together than we think were like back in the day. So I mean, Dilophosaurus is such a cool animal. It is one of those dinosaurs from Jurassic Park where you're like, why did they change it? Like, actual Dilophosaurus is such an awesome animal. And, I mean, I have to put it in S tier, honestly. Who doesn't love Dilophosaurus? CRYOLOPHOSAURUS. Now, CRYOLOPHOSAURUS is a large theropod, known from a single species, CRYOLOPHOSAURUS eliotai, and it's from early Jurassic, again. This is a very long time, at the beginning of the Jurassic in Antarctica. Now, as with Dilophosaurus, for early Jurassic, this guy was an absolute unit. Even subadults were huge. They reached 20 feet in length and weighed 1,000 pounds. Again, CRYOLOPHOSAURUS was no slouch when it came to size. First carnivore, again, first carnivorous dinosaur that was found in Antarctica that honestly gives it points. Antarctica is, we don't have a lot of fossil material from there. Thankfully, we do have some really incredible fossils. I can't remember the name of the formation, but there's an actual formation where we do get fossils. and also the first non-avian dinosaur that was named from that continent. Pretty awesome. CRYOLOPHOSAURUS, the first of everything. And one of the, on the other hand, one of the, much more dubious things is that the material has caused great discourse, especially in terms of how to classify it, because the actual fossils that we have, for example, we have a femur, and the femur shows some traits which much closely resembles, primitive Dilophosaurids, which, puts it closer to Dilophosaurus. But the skull, for example, it shows much more advanced traits closer to Titaneurans. So, speaking of the skull, it has the most, distinctive feature, which is that side-to-side crest that has, like, a little bit in front of the eyes, which, kind of looks like a pompadour, and that sometimes it is known as the Elvis dino. CRYOLOPHOSAURUS, such a cool animal. It shows traits from primitive and much more derived theropods. It's from a place which, doesn't yield a ton of fossils. And, all around, it's a very unique theropod. I love CRYOLOPHOSAURUS. I might like it more than Dilophosaurus, honestly. But it doesn't get that much rep. I don't know why. It should be more popular. So, CRYOLOPHOSAURUS, I'm going to put it in S tier, honestly. This Jurassic theropods are awesome. YANGCHUANOSAURUS. Now, YANGCHUANOSAURUS is a metriacanthosaurid. Yes, metriacanthosaurid. Try spelling that. Theropod that lived in China. Now, this was from the Middle Jurassic to the Late Jurassic. And I would say it's similar in size and, build to the North American and European Allosaurus. And it honestly served a pretty similar niche, being the top predator of the Shaximiao Formation. I don't know if I said that right, Shaximiao Formation. I think so. And where it probably hunted, the likes of Mamenchisaurus, Omesaurus, Stegosaurus, like, Tuajingosaurus, Chelingsaurus, Chunkingosaurus too. But this guy, again, was huge. I do have a YANGCHUANOSAURUS figure here. It is pretty rad, I have to say. Their skull, I'll talk about the skull a little later. The body length of YANGCHUANOSAURUS is estimated to be at 26 feet. Or at least that is for the Shangyoensis species, because the newer specimens, which have been given the name of the species name Magnus, which this figure is modeled after, suggest that the sizes could reach 35 feet. Now, that is huge. 35 feet and 3.5 tons. Pretty imposing. You see those long arms, clawed digits, pretty long tail. The cool thing is that skull. Pretty impressive. It does present those bony ridges with, multiple little hornlets and, more, I wouldn't say like a crest, but it does resemble kind of like one. And Tyrannosaurus, how I would describe its skull is, short and tall, which honestly resembles Abelisaurus, if you know about the Abelisaur group. I like to think YANGCHUANOSAURUS as, obviously being a contemporary of Allosaurus. A lot of people make the, as I said with the Allosaurus entry, that YANGCHUANOSAURUS is kind of like the equivalent of Allosaurus in Asia. So what I like to think about in my headcanon is that Allosaurus being known as the lion of Jurassic, YANGCHUANOSAURUS would be, like the tiger, which, with the stripe pattern, orange stripes, orange base with the dark stripes, honestly kind of looks like a tiger pattern. Pretty sick. YANGCHUANOSAURUS, I am tempted to put in S tier as well. I can't be putting all of them in S tier. So I'm going to do something which is going to, make a lot of people mad. I'm going to lower Dilophosaurus. I love Dilophosaurus, but I think I like YANGCHUANOSAURUS a bit more. CERATOSAURUS. This right here might be my favorite dinosaur. Ceratosaurus is a theropod that lived in the late Jurassic. in a little place you might have heard of called the Morrison Formation, with fragmentary evidence that it might have lived in Portugal and Tanzania. Now, this guy was a medium-sized predator, with the largest specimen measuring around 23 feet. It is heavily characterized because of their deep jaws, where these jaws supported some abnormally large and long blade-like teeth. These teeth were huge for the size of this animal. It had a prominent ridge again in like a horn, like on the midline of the snout, and also had a pair of horns which were on top of the over both eyes. Had really short forelimbs. Their arms were really short even for its size, and had little rows of osteoderms that run from the neck, the back, and the tail. These have been actually found. If you see some, I have the actual YANGCHUANOSAURUS figure right here. You see this little midline of osteoderms. Those are actually known from CERATOSAURUS. Now, what I like to think of CERATOSAURUS, like how I like to think about it, is that it is the absolute underdog of its environment. He was probably I'm saying he, like like he's an actual character. It was probably a generalist animal. It ate a lot of different things. It probably hunted from small to medium-sized herbivores. Probably fished as well. There was a little theory going around that it was only a fish-eating dinosaur, which doesn't make any sense because it has traits to make it a land predator as well. It probably scavenged too, like any other predator. But it's the fact that it had to live with absolute menaces like ALLOSAURUS and Torvosaurus that I love, that make me love CERATOSAURUS even more. Now that we're making analogies with making analog comparisons between today's predators and these Jurassic titans, if Allosaurus is the lion, then Ceratosaurus is definitely the hyena of the Jurassic, and is my absolute favorite dinosaur, which puts it in a league of their own. It's going to be in the Ceratosaurus tier. And that is the tier list, guys. Once again, thank you again for watching. Hope you like this Jurassic Theropod tier list. I did try to take some from each different group. I didn't honestly, this started as an Allosaurus, like a Dilophosaurid tier list, but I was like, why only Dilophosaurids? There's like not a ton of them, honestly. And I'm like, well, ELAPHROSAURUS is a Noasaurid, and there are some, there's not a ton of them either. PIATNITZKYSAURUS is a thing. Metriacanthosaurus do have some members, but again, not a ton, and not very, they're not very fossil heavy, very fragmentary. So I decided to, just take the most well-known Jurassic theropods, not all of them. But because, I could do is another Jurassic Theropod tier list. But, I took this ones particularly because they'd find them interesting each in their own way. Again, let me know in the comments what would be your tier list. What is your favorite Jurassic Theropod? And if you want me to make, a Triassic one, maybe. Although I don't think there's a ton of them. How you can help me with the videos, please. As I said, comment helps a lot. Like helps even more, and subscribe, it helps even more. So without just making this outro any longer than it already is. Thank you for watching.